You're listening to ASOTU CON Sessions by Space Auto, recorded live at ASOTU CON 2025. We're live on the ASOTU CON podcast stage, powered by Space Auto, in the heart of the action here at ASOTU CON 2025. I'm Paul J Daly, and I'm here today with John Bozzella of the Alliance for Automotive Innovation, talking about how to be an innovative leader in today's auto industry. John, thank you so much for giving us a few minutes and taking the little trip up here to ASOTU CON for the first time.
It is great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so we say this a lot. Things are changing really quickly, and it's not even worth saying anymore almost. So we're going to get into that, but I would love to hear the story of how you got into the industry. I don't know the story, and I think it's an always important context setter so that we can hear what's coming next.
Fantastic. All right, well, thanks for that. So I'll do the quick version, and we can go wherever you want to go.
Yeah.
So I'm a kid from the New York suburbs. Right? So I grew up on Long Island. So fact number one about Long Island is the first expression of freedom is a driver's license. Right? Like if you so I grew up in the 70s and 80s on Long Island. So your only way to escape the doldrums of the suburbs to be able to drive around, right?
Yeah.
So I became a casual car person. My brother and I chipped in together and bought a car. So my first car was a Cadillac Eldorado.
It's a big car.
1972. Oh no, I'm sorry. It was a Cadillac Coupe de Ville. It was 1972. These must have had the largest doors ever created by a Detroit company.
Those things are tanks.
Massive, right? So of course we buy this thing used.
6-foot door.
And we used to drive this thing around, and you'd put gas in when you were a kid. You'd be like, I need $5 of gas.
Yes.
$5 of gas in that car. Maybe the day. Maybe.
Which is crazy because that was like 9 gallons.
Yes. Anyway, but not really. Sort of. It didn't set me into the car world directly, right? So my other passion was politics and government, and that was a little bit of.
Where did that come from?
Yeah, some of it came from, growing up in a family that had strong opinions, a worldview, and a little bit of political experience, and some of it just came from being an argumentative kid, and that's what you argue about in college, right? So that got me sort of down the road. So I ended up in politics, and I worked in City Hall in New York City for a mayor of the city of New York. So I became, at a relatively young age, involved in politics at a relatively senior level.
Talk about getting exposed to a whole new world.
Yeah. So, and it was, I'll say this, I was going to say just between you and me, but just between you and me and the thousands and thousands of people that follow you and millions of people that follow you, I probably had no business having that job. I was 27 years old. And so it was also my first taste of adversity and how to really deal with the challenges of a big job and a daunting set of circumstances.
On a lot of times, major issues that affect people's lives.
Exactly right. So anyway, I navigated that. My boss lost his reelection. And so the mayor I was working for was thrust out of office. I went to work for a governor of the state of New York, and he was thrust out of office. But here's what happened. Ford Motor Company was looking for somebody to help them navigate politics in the Northeast. There was something new taking place in the Northeast states in the mid-1990s, and it was this. Massachusetts and New York had adopted this very obscure law called the California ZEV mandate. Everybody knows about this now, but this was new then. So that's how I got into the auto industry. It was through my political involvement. They said, we need somebody with, sort of political skills. We can kind of teach them the auto industry. And that's how I fell in love with cars. That's how I fell in love with the car business. And, so you go from there, and I had...
That's so funny because that is oftentimes the narrative that happens, but from the front line of the industry. We need somebody that knows people.
Right.
We can teach them the auto industry.
Yes.
So very similar, but from a totally different direction.
Yeah.
I haven't heard before.
And I do think there is to your point about leadership, it helps to be able to think about your skills and how they can be broadly applied, right? So for example, I was hired in as a government affairs person. Well, what happened after that? I had a senior executive come up to me and say, those same skills that we use from you in government affairs can be applied to labor relations. So then I went into labor relations. right? And so, that was part of the growth of my auto experience was, using my skill set in different ways.
So you're working for Detroit.
Yeah.
And what got you from there to what you're doing now with the Alliance?
Yeah. So, I worked for 10 years at Ford Motor Company. I had an opportunity to take an executive position with what was then Daimler Chrysler, and then what became Chrysler Private Equity, and then what became bankrupt Chrysler, and then what became Fiat Chrysler,
yes.
all in a 5-year period, by the way.
Oh yeah.
So I developed a fairly deep track record at this intersection of policy and automotive technology, and a position opened up in the trade association space that I'd never done this before. Convening the industry more broadly. And so, a headhunter called me up and said, "Hey, would you look at this?" And I did, and that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years.
So the Alliance for Automotive Innovation, we quote you all the time in our morning show because a lot of people quote you, right? And to help us make sense of decisions that are being made, new mandates, new technologies. How would you define the trajectory of the Alliance? Like, what is your mission? You wake up every day, we're going to try to do this thing.
Yeah. So tell the story of the auto industry. Now it sounds, that's easy, right? All politics is narrative, and all narrative is storytelling, right? You have to be able to convey, the arc of success of the auto industry, the 10 million jobs, the 10 million Americans that rely on this industry in one way or another for their livelihood, the fact that it's 5% of GDP, the fact that the rare earth elements and the critical minerals and the magnets that go into today's EVs are going to scale up and support a modern defense industry so we contribute to our national security. Those elements of industry success that tell a story of economic contribution and support for American society is what we do at a broad level. So now what you have to do is you have to add credibility to that. You have to add data to that. You have to add research to that. And you also have to be, you have to be a straight shooter. You can't be seen as a shill or as somebody who works off of talking points. But that is essentially what we do. And in an environment that's so incredibly dynamic,
yes,
as the auto industry is today.
More
People
than ever,
are looking
yes.
for that. Tell me what this means.
Well, if you were to summarize the value of the auto industry, how would you do it? Because you do it in a broad way. Yeah. What are you saying to someone who is like, oh, the auto industry, like they're in it for themselves, like let's let everybody do everything, let's everybody sell something, make it wherever they want. What is your narrative?
Yeah. So here's what I tell people. I say a healthy and competitive auto industry is critical to our economic and national security. I always start with that. And because that gets people's attention, right? They say, well, okay, you're not trying to sell me a car, you're not trying to sell me a type of car, or you're not trying to convince me of something, you're making a statement that like, I want to understand.
Right, why?
Right, so it's exactly. So I try and, probe people with a premise that makes them want to know more. And so that's where I start, which is a healthy and competitive industry is critical to our economic and national security.
John, we only have a minute or so left. What do you think is the lowest hanging fruit? How can we help push that narrative into culture a little bit more? Because a lot of dealers are going to listen to this. What is their role? Because OEM, one thing, right? Mass, like high level narratives. But what can the dealers do in states all over the country to help, take advantage of this broader narrative and like push it down in their local community?
Yeah, this is so important, right? I understand dealers have to look at today, tomorrow, and the end of the month.
Yes.
And it's critical.
Yeah.
But I also think that collectively we've got to look at the big picture. We've got to win a competition with China and the China automotive industry. We have to control our own destiny. So to me, I think the lowest hanging fruit is we have to have a shared vision of a competitive future for the U.S. auto industry and articulate that every day.
How can people connect with you or follow along with your work?
So they can find us at autosinnovate.org. They can find us on all sorts of social platforms, and we are Alliance for Automotive Innovation.
John, thank you so much for giving us some of your time and visiting your very first ASOTU CON.
I love it here. Thanks for having me, Paul. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this ASOTU CON session brought to you by Space Auto. At ASOTU, we're obsessed with uniting people around one big idea, that thriving people are the only path to a thriving and profitable industry. If that resonates with you, head over to morethancars.com to join our email list and explore our full list of podcasts.